A 9-game NBA slate coming our way tonight, so it is time for NBA Building Blocks with DraftKings contributors Matt Meiselman and Jeff Pratt. So, best DFS plays for tonight's 9-game slate. I want to know, Matt, can you build your lineup around a value play?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure who it's going to be yet. I know that Chris Dunn with Portland is going to be a pretty popular pick tonight with the $3,800 price tag. He's been playing a lot of minutes, but I think in this game, we could find out pretty soon that Josh Hart is resting. The Blazers just played yesterday, and Hart is really the only veteran on this team at this point. So that could open up a lot for some guys who don't usually get big minutes. So while Dunn is the focal point for a lot of people building lineups today, I think someone like Ben McLemore at 3,600 could wind up starting in Josh Hart's place. And if that happens, I think 30-plus minutes is a reasonable expectation. So this is kind of one of those I don't know slates. And on the other side of this game, the Pistons have a bunch of questionable players too. So I think the simple answer is yes, there will be plenty of value plays in this game somewhere. I'm not quite sure who they're going to be yet, but I think McLemore is a pretty good candidate for one.
All right, Jeff, a lot of question marks right now, but do you think you can build around a value play here?
Yeah, like Matt, I had Chris Dunn and Ben McLemore on my list, so I'm going to pivot to Denny Avdija at 4,400. Avdija has been consistently productive as of late, scoring 24-plus DK fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games, including a pair of 30-plus fantasy point outings. A major name to keep an eye on for this one is Kyle Kuzma, who has sort of revived his career in Washington this season. He missed the Wizards' last game, and Avdija saw a 23.6% usage rate. As a result, Kuzma is questionable for this one, and if he's unable to suit up due to knee tendonitis, Avdija should see an expanded offensive role once again. I still like him if Kuzma plays at this price, mostly due to the fact that Houston ranks 29th in fantasy points allowed to wings, but he's a must-play if Kuzma sits.
All right, so if you're building around a value play, you might have some money to work with. Any chance with guards you're trying to slide in Doncic, Jeff? He's going to be $12,000, $2,000 more than the next most expensive guy.
I'm not rolling with Luka. I'm not paying all the way up at guard tonight. I love Darius Garland at 9,300 though against the Lakers. I'm just picking on the Lakers as of late. I chose Pascal Siakam as my favorite big on Friday and now Garland, but can you really blame me? LA ranks dead last in the league in DK fantasy points allowed to guards and 27th in defensive rating over their last 10 games. They also rank 6th in pace and 3rd in turnovers, which is just a recipe for disaster for the Lakers and more opportunities for Garland as a result. Speaking of Garland, he's racked up 47-plus DK fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. I expect him to stay hot tonight.
All right, favorite guard, what do we think?
I'll go with Luka. I think it's a good call.
Yes.
Doncic has not played a ton of minutes the last couple games. They lost to Philly in sort of a blowout. I think Luka lost a couple minutes at the end of that game. And then the Mavericks were blown out by the Hornets the next game after that. Luka didn't even reach 30 minutes. So I think seeing the recent game log, people might be a little scared to pay up all the way to $12,000. But like I was saying before, if we get a ton of really cheap players on this slate, it becomes a lot easier to fit in Luka. I think Garland is a really good points per dollar play at the high end, but I think a lot of people will be on him. And then Cade Cunningham to a lesser extent. So I think paying up all the way to Luka might actually be fairly contrarian tonight.
All right, Matt, how about when you're looking at this slate, which forward do you like?
Yeah, I'm going to go right back to this Portland-Detroit game, which for meaningful basketball purposes is just a totally irrelevant basketball game. But for DFS, this is just massive. Like the whole slate, I think, kind of hinges on this game. So I'll go Saddiq Bey, $7,100. I think people will be interested in him for obvious reasons. He just scored 50 points the other night. Cunningham was out of that game, but even with Cunningham back, we have Jeremy Grant not playing. We have potentially Kelly Olynyk not playing and a few others on Detroit. They're a pretty shorthanded team right now. And yes, Bey is probably a little overvalued coming off what is just a totally unexpected 51-point performance. But 7,100 is probably just way too cheap for him for, one, the usage that he gets with Grant out of the lineup, and then 2, the matchup with the Blazers, who I think, especially if you take Josh Hart off the court, there couldn't be a better opponent to be facing right now. So I think Bey is in a really good spot, and the price is a little bit too low.
All right, Jeff, which forward do you think is in a really good spot?
I didn't go with Luka at guard because LeBron James is the one guy I absolutely can justify paying all the way up for at 11.6K tonight. The Lakers are in the midst of a brutal season, but they're still hanging on to a play-in spot, and LeBron is going to do his best to keep them there. He scored 60 plus fantasy points in back-to-back games and is listed questionable tonight with left knee soreness, but that's pretty much a formality at this point. The Lakers typically throw him on the injury report, and he almost always suits up. But the number one reason I'm so high on LeBron tonight, the Lakers are traveling to Cleveland. We know how much the city of Cleveland means to LeBron. There's no chance he doesn't put on a show for that crowd tonight.
All right, Jeff, looking at centers, who you going with?
I like the idea of saving some money and rolling with Jackson Hayes at 5,400. He's racked up 30-plus DK fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games, and he scored double-digit points in 5 straight contests. Hayes has carved out a solid role for himself as the Pelicans fight for a play-in spot, playing 22-plus minutes in 10 of his last 11 games, including 37 minutes last night. Charlotte ranks 25th in DK fantasy points allowed to big men, and they really get up and down the floor, ranking 3rd in pace this season. Hayes is a rim-running big that thrives in high-paced situations, so I think he should stay hot tonight.
All right, Matt, are you going to pay up for center?
Sort of. Well, I think that this could end up being a slate where most people pay down for center. I certainly don't want to do that with DeAndre Jordan if Joel Embiid ends up sitting. So I'm staying away from that one as far as possible because DeAndre Jordan is just one of the worst centers in the league right now. And even though he's really cheap, I want to look elsewhere. So I like where Jeff's looking with the Wizards situation. I'll go with Kristaps Porzingis in the $7,000 range. I think if Kuzma's out, and we saw this the other night, Porzingis had a really big game against the Lakers. The minutes won't necessarily be any higher because I think the Wizards are a little bit worried about Porzingis' health. They want to save him for next year. The playoffs are a bit of a long shot right now, but the usage without Kuzma, who just loves to shoot the ball and just has the ball in his hands most of the game, the usage has to go up if Kuzma's not there. So really good spot against the Rockets either way, but if you take Kuzma out of there, I think KP does a lot for fantasy purposes tonight.